February 12th. Trips and Traps, Andy Serling, joined by Richard Migliore.
I really like this show. I like the 4 races that you picked out. I think they all have a common thread. A lot of them go back to the start, and it underscores just how important starts are in the running of a race, how the race is going to develop.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to watch how the riders deal with the bad hand that they're dealt with their horses at the start. And we're going to start out with a maiden race, and a horse that was a long shot that lost to a 3-5 shot. This horse is relatively exposed, the 5 Say Sin Sin, but I thought this horse ran extremely well, and I know that Richie agrees with me.
She ran extremely well, and you can see kind of got off to a bumbling beginning. Fernando Yara kind of fell back on her a little bit because she wasn't standing properly in the gate.
Steady there.
And then she steadied again when the eventual winner came out fairly abruptly.
Yeah,
kind of an unusual move. Jose Ortiz looking, I guess he thinks, I'm on the best horse, I just don't want to get trapped up, and he made sure he was out in the clear by the first turn.
Right. I would argue that the winner may have run a little bit better than it looks also because of what you're saying. She didn't break that well, and Jose rushed her up in the game. At this point, Say Sin Sin is in the back of the pack, and it's not so different than Far From Under, who we're going to talk about in the next race, but I think that she ended up getting a bit more of an aggressive ride into the race. I don't know if she would have won, but it might have cost her.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, eventually she's only beaten 2 lengths. I know why Fernando Yara got aggressive with her. She was climbing severely from the dirt. So you have 2 choices. Either force her to run through the dirt or get in the clear. And I think when he started her going forward, he tipped her to the clear, and now he's committed to making that early run.
Well, that's an interesting point. And I also wonder if the fact that this pace was considerably slower also had somewhat of an effect on it, too. I mean, what is he supposed to do? Grab her face and rip her face off because they're going slowly up front? So I don't think he rode her badly. I don't think he did a bad job was going on. I just think he was dealt a bad hand, Richie.
I agree with that. He was dealt a bad hand. Again, going back to the break. And, you know, the break is just an important part of the race, if not more so, because it establishes position and where you're going to be and the kind of trip you're going to wind up getting.
Yeah, well, not only did she have that trouble breaking a little slowly and awkwardly, but she stayed again after it. What I liked about her was he asked her an awfully long way in this race, always out in the middle of the racetrack after that start, and she really never stopped running. In fact, arguably, she was getting to the winner a little bit late.
Yeah, I think she was cutting into the winner. I think the winner might have got to loafing a little bit, so maybe it appeared a little bit more competitive than actually it was. But I think this is the kind of race that the light goes on with a horse, that she says, wow, I am capable of making this run. I think she's going to be a lot better for this experience.
Yeah, and the race got a 74 buyer. I mean, obviously that's not huge stakes performance time, but considering that Take Charge Brandy got a 77 buyer when she won the stake down at Oaklawn the other day, we're not talking about a huge gap between these horses and stakes horses. And the first place finisher, obviously a Chad Brown horse, Murray Schwartz, 3-5. They probably think they have a future with that horse, and reasonably so. Why can't Say Sin Sin have a future as well?
Well, I think this was a harbinger of things to come for her. This was a big step forward for her from her first 2 races, and I think she'll take another step forward off of this race.
No, I agree. I think she's a promising filly as well, and there's certainly room for some 3-year-old fillies to emerge, and maybe some will come out of this race. We're going to look at the much-talked-about Withers as our next race, and obviously we're going to pretty much focus on Far From Over, and we're going to show you the head-on of the stumble at the start just to show you how severe it was.
Yeah, I mean, he splays. Watch his front legs. He'll splay out. It's amazing that he caught himself at all. Most horses would have gone down to their nose. It did stop all his momentum, though, because he had to check himself to regain his footing. And after that, I think we can agree, Manny Franco gave a textbook ride to a horse that was very compromised at the break.
No, I agree. And not panicking in getting the horse to settle. And obviously, you're seeing him drop back significantly, a good 3-4 lengths, and it takes longer to settle himself. But here's the favorite, El Kabir, who I want to talk about him a little bit because we have some time to talk about the race. I thought he ran very well in here, and some were knocking him because he lost after being a visually impressive winner his last start. I thought this was a better effort, Richie.
I agree with you, and he kind of had a similar trip too. On the outside post, caught a bit wide the first turn. Chucky Lopez doing everything he can to settle him here like he did the last time. Although I think the first quarter was a bit slower, and then finally the horse kind of gets away from him just a touch, and they speed up the race in the middle. But I think he hung in there better this time. The competition was just a little different.
I totally agree. I think, that's why you just watch races and you say, oh, he won by 5 lengths. He ran really well. You have to look at speed figures. You have to look at the competition. This was a talented field, and Classy Class hung in very well for third. I know that Kieran wished they had let him go more slowly up front, and he feels that perhaps El Kabir could have won. He could have been second. I think El Kabir had to engage him, because if he hadn't done that, it's not impossible possible that Classy Class could have wired this field.
Well, and also it gets to a point where you know as a rider you're taking so much hold, and there's a break point. You don't want to take so much hold where the horse flips his head in your lap, and then his breathing's going to be impaired, and you basically mess up your horse's stride. At some point, you have to give in and allow your horse to get in a rhythm.
And he is a horse that's 1-2 and maybe a little over bet, but he's still much the horse to beat. So while he's engaging in front and March is getting that very good trip and he didn't finish, good ride from Jose Ortiz, not good enough. You see him, of course, between horses. Here is the eventual winner far from over, and this is when Manny Franco starts riding.
Yeah, and again, you go back to bad start. You know you have to do everything right after that. You can't afford to blow ground because you've already been put in a compromising position. He saved every inch, cut the corner, came out. Now, obviously, he's got horse. He's full of run. But if you want to teach young riders how to ride a race that you've been compromised at the break, this is the video you should show them.
No, this was an exceptional ride by a young rider with a big future. And it's not as though, Richie, the race completely fell apart. I mean, if it was a super fast pace and the speeds collapsed and everybody came from well back, you might have said, and this thing I want to talk to you about, that the start was a blessing for him. He really ran very well in here. But here is the question. Was the start, in a funny way, a bit of a blessing for him? Because his speed type, he might have engaged early.
Yeah, no, in essence it was, but, I mean, you'd like to do that without having to stumble. The thing is he won his first start essentially wire to wire. He was in the clear, head and head for lead, and he was resolute. This time they found out something about him because of the stumble, that he can settle, he can finish, he can take dirt, he can overcome adversity. I think this race was tremendous for him on so many levels because it's going to make him a better horse going forward.
No question about it. It'll be very interesting to see what happens to Gotham, because presumably, and hopefully, he's going to break well. How much sharper is he going to be? How much more is he going to be in the game? And I think it's very interesting in watching these three-year-olds develop. And there's no doubt this is a very talented horse.
Yeah, well, you just hope that he breaks well and they get him to settle well. Obviously, maybe not being that far back or being jammed back, but I don't think you want to see him back up as part of the pace.
No, it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I know we're kind of rooting for him because he's an inter-track horse, and it's nice to see and show people that good horses run in the inter-track during the winter. And a guy like Manny Franco is here all winter. I mean, he finds himself on a real Kentucky Derby probable right now, and it can happen here.
A lot of poise for a really young, talented rider.
Absolutely. Now, I want to talk about a race that resulted in a somewhat controversial disqualification. We're not going to get involved in the disqualification discussion. It's not appropriate here, but we want to talk about the relative trips of the gray horse Don Dolce, the horse who runs, he's there. You've got the 6th horse in this race, and that is Stake Pit, who finished 2nd. But more importantly, Celebrated Talent, who didn't stumble at the start. He just broke a length slowly. I thought this was a very good ride by Angel Cruz, realizing he got left and figuring, you know what, there's 4 going. What am I going to do here at this point? And he gets the horse to settle very well at the back of the pack and shows completely different dimension.
And you could see about 50 yards out of the gate, he made a conscious decision. I can't let him go forward because I didn't break well, and now I'm going to be in between horses 3-4 wide. He took a hold of him, he tucked him in behind the gray horse Don Dolce, and that showed a lot of poise from another young rider.
Yeah, I mean, getting a horse like this to relax that facilely and settle behind horses without getting rank is very, very impressive for both the horse and the rider. Now, Stake Pit gets a little bit of a breather about the 2.5-3 path at this point, but he was 4 wide in the first turn. He's going to be the first attacker making that 3-wide attack, while Don Dolce, the gray horse, as well as Celebrated Talent, they sit in back and they sit on the rail in a race that effectively fell apart. Because don't forget, this is also the fouled horse, Bamada. Now, he was probably going to run 4th anyway, but all the horses that effectively ran well in here came from behind, but Snake Pit was the one who did the most work.
Well, he did. He was, like you said, 4 wide the first turn, 3 wide the second turn, always in between horses, never in a place where he could just really breathe and get comfortable. He was always under some sort of pressure.
Yeah, no, I thought this was an excellent effort by him. And there was so much discussion of Celebrated Talent getting left and coming from last in this race and the disqualification. And I think lost in it was how well Snake Pit ran in here. Celebrated Talent ran very well here, but I think it's more because we were surprised he was able to rate as effectively as he did, because in truth, he got a very good trip.
Well, he did. I mean, yes, he did have to tip wide, but now he's got momentum. You don't want to break that momentum. And there, as we see, a horse gets fouled in between them. I thought Don Dolce and he both got terrific rides. Don Dolce broke well, and Ruben Severa was able to ease to the inside and cover him up and save every inch of ground. So in a perfect world, you want to break well and get that trip. The eventual third place finisher disqualified, Celebrated Talent, he broke slow to get that trip, but in a perfect world, break well and get that trip.
Yeah, and it's funny, though, because of the way the race was run and the dynamics of the race, you know, you feel like, what if Celebrated Talent breaks the top and they are aggressive going to the front? he's going to have to go fairly fast in doing so, and the race may fall apart. So it may have been a blessing in disguise, and they learned something about it.
Well, fast and caught wide, and that's the two things you don't want on the inner track, is to be engaged in a battle, especially while you're wide.
Yeah, this was a very interesting race to take apart and look at. And now we want to show the old pro, and once again you come to the break, and this is Wise Awake, the 10-year-old mare with 30 wins coming here, and she just loses it at the break, and she ran extremely well in this race.
Yeah, and this she does all on her own. You're going to see her go straight in the air. The assistant starter's trying to get away from her to show he doesn't have a hold of her. But this is something when she was younger she used to do. I went back and watched replays, and when she was a very young 4- or 5-year-old, she was doing this on a consistent basis. She did it again. You know, that's always in there. When a horse has had gait habits in the past, Andy, they'll tend to show up from time to time. She doesn't do it very often anymore. Unfortunately, she did this time. And we believe, I'm sure that you believe, I should say, I know I believe that it cost her the win.
Oh, I think it cost her the win. I mean, this was a miraculous performance by her. As we talk about the race, we're going to be talking for about 45 seconds or so before you even see her. And, you know, I didn't even realize it until I was preparing for this show. I remember watching the first time and being impressed just how far back she is top of the stretch, Richie. And honestly, and you can't blame Jose Ortiz, he's kind of protecting her in here because she's just got no chance she's so far back. And I think she surprised him how much she was running.
Yeah, I agree with you. And he was doing the right thing. When you get a horse below the break that much, you want to take care of them because, you know what, there might be a race in a week or 2 weeks that they can wheel right back in because it wasn't a hard effort on her. You're going to see her now. You're going to circle her how far back she really is, and she finds her stride. And what tells the story about how good she was, and we're going to show it, Andy, is the gallop out. And this is why you got to pay attention to gallop out. She blew by the field.
I mean, they didn't go 20 yards past the wire, and she was absolutely blowing by everybody. Now, I understand she had gotten a full head of steam, and they were relaxing a little bit at the wire, but honestly, she was absolutely flying in this race because she is nowhere close. And here she comes in the picture pretty much all on her own. As you see her picking up fifth there, and in a couple of seconds we're going to come to the gallop out, she will already, Richie, be in front. There she is.
I mean, there she is. Now she's in front, and they haven't even gone an eighth of a mile past the finish, and he's even got a hold of her. She finished full of run, and I think that's something that people need to look at. Watch gallop outs. Watch how horses, now some horses do shut down on their own right away, but every now and then you're going to pick up on one that shows that energy through the finish that you go, you know what, I'm going to follow this horse.
Yeah, I want to give this horse another chance, especially on a fast track. That does it for this week's Trips and Traps. We can always use your help. It's Trips and Traps at NYRank.com.